When you look at the size of some Lego products, it can be a very intimidating hobby to start, but nothing is as intimidating as Lego Star Wars. I started collecting Lego in 2007, but despite it being one of Lego's all-time most popular themes, I didn't buy my first Lego Star Wars set until April of 2020. But at this point, I've dabbled in new sets, retired sets, UCS sets, 4+ sets, and anything basically besides large-scale mock building. So I thought I would share some of the things that I have learned over the last couple of years when it comes to specifically Lego Star Wars. Starting off, I want to touch on one of the most popular subsections when it comes to Lego Star Wars, specifically I feel like with the prequels generation, and that is army building, and specifically clone army building. This was something that I did not touch with a 50-foot pole until like early 2022, and then I got absolutely addicted to it. In fact, I made an entire video about it, basically making fun of the process and making fun of myself in how I enjoy doing it. It's the weirdest thing. Now, when I got into the hobby, it didn't make sense to me. I saw pictures of people's armies and yeah, it looked really cool. I mean, I did kind of want a ton of stormtroopers when I was a kid, and just seeing that be able to happen with people's collections was really cool, but just considering how expensive it was, even at like buying things for retail, it didn't make any sense to me. I was like, why would anyone do that? Until I started to do it. In fact, it basically all started because I said to myself, oh, I'll buy 2 501st battle packs, because you know, that set seems like it played an important part of the Lego online culture and things like that. And you know, it's clones, I could get multiple, and I opened multiple and I stacked them along side by side, and then a couple more clone sets came out and I was like, oh, well, like I can't just have 2 sets of clones, I should buy 2 packets, and then 2 packets slowly turned into 4, and then 4 turned into 8, and now I have like a bunch of little Star Wars armies. Now, they're not massive by any means, however, it's way more than I probably should have. So that being said, when it comes to clone army buildings, if you get into it or like think about getting into it, just beware, you will be brainwashed, but you will be happy about it. It's one of those things where you just kind of fall into it and you get completely sucked in. You get engrossed by it because it is so cool to just see all these little minifigures stacked up next to each other. It doesn't make any sense because of how much it would cost and just how stupid the concept is, and I genuinely do love it a lot. Would I recommend it to people? Absolutely not. The second thing is that sometimes newer isn't better. Over the last couple of years, Lego has really improved their game. All of their models are so beautiful and so refined, and they are putting out some absolute works of art, just in terms of, I guess, model making and literal art, I guess, rather than the terms of a Lego set, and half of that comes from the amount of new pieces that they have in production now, and also the scale that they're building in these days with the amount of giant sets that are on production. However, there are a lot of cases where I found that the remakes of a product, specifically in Lego Star Wars, isn't actually as good as the older version. Now, specifically with Lego Star Wars, they have been producing a lot of sets each year for several years now, even back in the early 2010s, where Lego had really, I guess, like hit a great point when it came to their production quality. Their minifigures and some of their models as well were amazing and hold up to today's standards, and even sometimes in a rare occasion surpass them, especially when you look at Lord of the Rings and how they printed on their minifigures, and even just the designs of their models. And Star Wars can be pretty similar. There are a lot of characters that may not even have been remade yet. There are a lot of models that personally I prefer, and a lot of minifigures that still look incredible up against the newer versions of today. Now, of course, this isn't the case with everything. I mean, the C-3PO in the UCS Luke's Landspeeder is absolutely amazing. However, there are also a lot of minifigures where the older one is just fantastic. One of my favorite examples for this, though, is with the Boba Fett Palace that came out in 2020. I looked at that set and I just did not like the design of it. I remember seeing Jabba's palace a lot as a kid, and it looked really, really cool. And these days, it's very expensive, and for good reason. That set is amazing. It has some amazing minifigures, and a lot of which too are exclusive, but just the model in general was a much better design. And there are so many minifigures that I look at in Lego Star Wars from that early period, which are just fantastic. I feel like Star Wars has always been really, really great and kind of above everyone else when it came to quality and prints and things like that. But yeah, definitely sometimes the newer stuff is not really as good as the older ones. One thing that really annoys me though with Lego Star Wars that I have noticed a lot is that there is no consistency at all. Like, I know it's not normal for everything to always be consistent, and that change is good sometimes, and that we should embrace it or whatever, but I feel like with Star Wars, they are constantly switching things up, just little things here and there, that there is no consistency, nothing matches, and then you're constantly having to like switch up styles. If we kind of go back to clone army building, stormtroopers are a great example of this. We had one helmet for many years, and the Stormtrooper design though would always change. There are so many different types of Stormtroopers that if you're building an army of Stormtroopers, they're guaranteed to probably have a bunch of differences between them just of how frequently they've updated them. Then in like 2016-ish, they updated the helmet. I was like, great, that's the Stormtrooper that I'm gonna collect when I army build. I'm gonna get that one. And there have been little differences here and there, but for the most part, they've stayed pretty consistent until this year, where we've now swapped out the hip color, which granted is not a major difference in the grand scheme of things, but it again is another thing where it's like, oh great, now we have another subsection of Stormtroopers. Do I prefer the white hip? Yeah, I do. Does it still annoy me that there is not a lot of consistency? Yes. Same thing happened with the clone helmets. They updated them so they could have holes and put visors on them, but then they gave those same helmets to every other clone trooper, and now the helmets don't match, and the fact that they don't match is really why I personally don't like them. It's such, again, a petty thing, but that is one thing I've noticed with Star Wars, is there is no consistency ever. The next thing I have written down is more of a piece of advice rather than something I've learned, but I literally quoted it as just buy the old one. Now this is dangerous advice, but this is also something important that I've learned over the last couple of years, because Star Wars is one of the most expensive Lego themes on the resale market. Artificially inflated or not, there are a lot of insane prices that you see for products, and a lot of that comes down to the demand, but also just how good things were back in the day. Like, there is some incredible stuff, and there are so many times where I have looked at a minifigure and it's an old model and I'm just kind of waiting for it to be remade, and I've tossed and turned, do I buy it, do I not? Some examples of this include Count Dooku, currently Jango Fett as well. I've looked at him for ages and I'm like, do I get him? Do I not? And look, the best piece of advice I can give you is just buy it. If you're really, really eyeing it and you can justify spending that amount of money, buy the old one. And I say that knowing full well that I have the Rebels Ghost set in the background, and they are about to remake that set. I bought that last year at its inflated price, which is really bad. However, at least with Lego Star Wars, and I don't know how long this is gonna continue on for, if it even does, but for the most part, a lot of Lego Star Wars will retain its value. Yes, it can drop a little bit, you might lose a little bit of money, but at the end of the day, at least for me, I'm buying Lego because I enjoy it, I love it. And if I can get some joy out of that, then the money that I lose on a product is nothing to me. So when it came to Count Dooku, I was looking at that like 2012, 2013 minifigure, and I was unsure. Do I wait for them to just remake it? Because they probably will, and it's gonna look really good. But I really liked that old model, and it doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. So I just bought the minifigure. It wasn't cheap either, but I'm really glad I have him in my collection. If they end up remaking him, I can always sell the old one if I want to, or maybe I don't even have to purchase the new one in any way. But yeah, if you're looking at things, you can justify it, you really, really want it, just go and buy the old one. There are some crazy prices though, so don't go and overspend just for the sake of it. Now this next one I guess kind of relates to Lego's mistranslated tagline of only the best is good enough. Because with Star Wars, I find that you can get the absolute best, but you can also get the worst. And I say worst like kind of in air quotes there. I don't mean literally the worst, but there is a lot of stuff that just like really ain't it with Lego Star Wars. I have said for a long time that I think Lego Star Wars minifigures are consistently the most detailed, accurate, and just beautiful looking things ever. I absolutely love them. There are so many in my collection which are just fantastic, and there are others that I make slight adjustments to and modify them, whether or not that's a clone needing a pauldron or a simple swapping of a hairpiece or whatever. I like upgrading minifigures in that way, but even without them, these minifigures are still fantastic. However, we can also get things like the current 2/12 clone troopers. Their printing on their helmets, I'm just not a fan of. And again, I mean, personally for me, I don't like the fact that the helmet mold isn't consistent, but that printing is a really, really, really frustrating thing. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely incredibly frustrating as a fan. And in my case as well, I ended up buying custom helmets that had printing that I personally would have liked to have seen, and it also had that kind of older style mold that I wanted. So I ended up replacing all of my helmets, which, you know, I'm going to do. Do I want to spend the extra money to do so? No, but that's something that I'm going to personally do for my collection. But with all that being said, you can get the best quality products, best detailed minifigures, and just a lot of Star Wars has the greatest things ever, but there is equally a lot of stuff that is just not that good. It's not as common though, but it's certainly there. Let's talk UCS sets though, because I feel like they often fall into like the best of the best category because they are some absolute works of art. That being said though, I would not recommend UCS sets to anyone unless you're an adult that has your own space. And I say that for one reason only, and that is just because they are so massive. If you just strictly collect UCS sets, you're gonna have like your entire house taken up within 2 years, let alone if you buy a bunch of other Lego Star Wars sets. They have some of the greatest models ever, but they are such a massive space commitment. You really gotta think about it. I've only really dabbled in the UCS sets. I mean, I built the Republic gunship, which was beautiful. I loved the model, but I ended up giving it away just because it was taking up too much space. I just could not justify having that thing around. It was so hard to store. I also built the UCS Luke's Landspeeder, which was really fun, but I really only bought it because I wanted the build experience and the C-3PO, so then I sold that too. And then I have Mos Eisley Cantina, and I've only half built it just because it's easier to have half of it on my shelf in the spot it's in rather than finish it and then try and put the whole thing in. I really love the UCS sets. I would love to be able to have the AT-AT and especially the Millennium Falcon. One day I'll get it, but I'm not gonna buy it until I know I have the space for it, just because it's so big. That or it retires, so I'm just holding off on it. They are amazing. I would recommend them to anyone. If you can afford them, if you have the space, if you have the opportunity to buy one, they are fantastic, but make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, because it is not worth buying that just for the sake of buying it. But let me know when you got into Lego Star Wars collecting in the comments below, and if you guys enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing to my channel down below, and until next time, I'll see you later.